Good evening. As you're finishing your dinner, we'd like to go ahead and take a moment to say a few thank yous. I'm Rick Caulfield. I'm Provost at the University of Alaska Southeast. And once again, I'd like to just express my appreciation to all of you for being here, for engaging in some marvelous conversations. I've heard from many of you just how enriching this last couple of days has been. We've been blessed by beautiful weather. So thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedules to join us here at the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Symposium. I'm joined by Paul Brewster with the U.S. Forest Service, the Pacific Northwest Lab. And we wanted to just take a moment. I was just talking with Beth Pendleton at our table about the importance of celebrations. And in a way, this is a celebration. It's a celebration of new friends. It's a celebration of new insights and knowledge gained from excellent presenters. It's a celebration of the knowledge we've gained from the elders who've been so gracious to share their knowledge with us over the last few days, and the opportunity to be out on the boat on Tuesday, those of you lucky enough to join us there, the magnificent setting and the knowledge that we gained from the presenters on board. So Gunash Chish to all of you who have been presenters at this session, and a celebration of new friends and new insights about coastal temperate rainforests. In saying that, we all know that this doesn't happen on its own. It's not one of those flash mob things that you do on your cell phone where everyone just sort of shows up and it happens. But in fact, it's a huge amount of work. At least I didn't get that flash mob notice. Maybe you did. And one of the things about this is here in Juneau, it's a smaller community. As many of you know, we don't have an infrastructure where we can easily do conferences. We have to, everyone has to put a shoulder to the wheel to make this happen. And I want to take a few minutes here to honor those who have been behind the scenes tirelessly working to make this a success. Both the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center itself and then this event in particular. And to start off, we're going to honor Mike Goldstein here in just a moment. But Mike has assembled a team of individuals who have been giving their time over the last really 6 months or so, tirelessly working to make this a successful event that it is. And so with that, I'd like to invite up Brad Ewing. Brad is here. Brittany Lenhart, Heather Bennett, Brittany Seavey, Adam Taylor, and Adam Karamasic. If they could come up, please, to the head table. I have watched from the back these individuals stepping forward time and again to make sure that the sessions that we've had went flawlessly, the presenters knew what was required of them, the technology was in place, the food was good, the poster sessions were set up properly, the registration went well. So I can't thank you enough from all of the members of the coordinating committee for the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center for all of the work you've done. We really appreciate it. It's been a flawless conference, and thank you very, very much. Let's give them a big round of applause. So thank you all, and I understand, as I say, we want to take a moment to honor Mike Goldstein, and we thought we would start by giving the staff themselves who wanted to say something about Mike the opportunity to do that first, or okay. So I'll turn it over to Brittany Lenhart.
Well, first I just want to thank all of you for coming. You work on something like this and you just hope, fingers crossed, that people are going to show up, and it wouldn't be anything without all of you being here. So thank you so much for celebrating this with us. I joined the ACRC in August, and I was the second employee. And then soon after, Heather joined, and Brad, and then our 3 lovely research assistants as well. And it has been an incredible opportunity to be a part of this organization as it's been growing and becoming what you see it is today. And I have Mike to thank for that. So thank you so much for putting so much faith in me and giving me this opportunity. We have a gift for you. I don't know where it is. Heather must have it. So Mike, thank you so much from all of us. It has been so much fun to put this on. Oh, also, for all speakers, coordinating committee members, and session chairs, we're hoping to have you sign the frame around the outside, so we're going to have it outside on the registration table after this evening.
And we'll ask Mike to stay here for a moment, and if we can swap out, what I'd like to do is have all the members of the coordinating committee for the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center, those of you who've been involved with the planning of this session, if you could come up to the stage and join us. Bill, you can't sit there quietly. Leilani. The coordinating committee for the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center wanted to prepare a letter. We've done that in honor of the exceptional work that Mike Goldstein has done as executive director for the center. Many of you know that Mike was detailed to the center by the U.S. Forest Service 2 years ago for a 2-year stint to help us get the center up and running, and he's done an exceptional job in that capacity. He and I have talked many times about some of the challenges of a startup organization. He really had to be an entrepreneur, a very different kind of a role, but he's done it very successfully. So I wanted to go ahead and read a letter that's been signed by all of the members of the coordinating committee. To Mike Goldstein, as representatives of partner institutions engaged with the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center, we wish to commend you for your dedication and commitment to excellence as executive director in building ACRC from its earliest foundations to the exciting organization that it is today. As you complete your 2-year ACRC leadership assignment and return to your U.S. Forest Service position, we want to thank you for your service and wish you well in future endeavors. Over the past 2 years, you've worked diligently with our institutions to develop ACRC's vision and mission, secure new funding and partner organizations, expand collaborative research and educational outreach, and increase ACRC's visibility. You organized and hosted a number of important gatherings of scientists, educators, and community members, including 2 cross-boundary data integration workshops, a climate change adaptation workshop, 2 community-focused BioBlitz education events, and this major symposium, Coastal Temperate Rainforests, Integrating Science, Resource Management, and Communities. Creating a new partnership organization is not easy, and ACRC's startup has not been without its challenges. That said, you've met those challenges head-on and clearly learned much about how to grow a new entity from the bottom up. ACRC has benefited greatly from your professional expertise, your networks, and your willingness to take on new challenges. Throughout this endeavor, you've been a tireless professional working to make ACRC a partnership of success. Thank you from all 16 signatories, the partner organizations in the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center. So let's give Mike Goldstein a big round of applause. And Paul Brewster also wanted to say a few words, so I'll let him do that now.
As I was thinking about this today, you know, Mike, you are literally in the final lap of this 2-year assignment, and I want to share with you a little bit of a reflection, because I remember just over 2 years ago, and at that time I was still serving as Deputy Regional Forester, and Mike was in the regional office, and I remember Mike sitting down with me, and we had a real heart-to-heart, because he really had, he was a lot of apprehension about stepping into this role. And I still remember, I said, you know, Mike, there's no guarantees. There's a lot of risk involved in something like this. You're going to have to sort of take a leap of faith. And I finally said, it's time, Mike, to fish or cut bait. You're going to have to decide whether you want to take on this role. And here we are 2 years later. I couldn't be more thrilled with how the symposium has turned out. Mike, you've poured your heart and soul into this, and I know that I'm speaking on behalf of the coordinating committee when I say this. You have so much to be proud of, is the effort that you've put into the startup of the center here for the last 2 years, and I just want to thank you personally and tell you how proud I am also, and thanks again.
I thought that I would have one last intro to do, and I had no way to flub it because it's Beth, and that's my home unit. So, but I probably will now. I have no real words to express my gratitude and appreciation to the 6 masterful people who I work with and the 16 organizations that I've been able to be a part of as the ACRC has grown. And I am honored at the commitment of time that so many of you have put into this now, and our relationship that we've grown over the past few years, here and now, from very dear friends to intensive work colleagues. And so I thank you all for spending that time. Paul and Rick, you've put a lot of time in, and I appreciate it. And the rest of you, from the many phone calls, the many minutes behind the scenes, thank you all. I have a small list that I would like to go through. Besides the ACRC staff and everyone who's been named so far, there are a few people who have really put some time in. The volunteers, it's on page 43, the volunteers and the production crew. There's too many names to list there, but specifically the session chairs. Jenny Kane, who's away on family leave right now, put a ton of time into the field trip, and I think those of you who managed to go found that she did remarkable work. Dominic Delasalle, Tom Ainsworth, Aaron Hood, Dave Demore, Paul Hennon, Brad Ewing, and Trista Patterson, Mayor Botello, Linda Kruger, and Faith Duncan. Thank you all for stepping up and stepping in. And some special thanks also to Sanjay Piari and Wayne Owen, Dave Albert, and the TNC crew for working with Peter and others and bringing in a village here. I'm happy and impressed by the length of and breadth of this organization. A conversation I had with Chris Maish before dinner gives just joy to my heart that we've reached out and touched so many, and I thank you. So I'm going to mess up here, but KTOO and 360 North, we all thank you. And as we look back at this on the video on demand and we share it with our colleagues who couldn't be here, thanks for your hard work. Cheryl, thank you. Abby's Kitchen did a wonderful job. Tom. And the many hours behind the scenes with Centennial Hall. We're all, many of us are public servants, and these folks have done a remarkable job. So, and one other person that I just barely left off there, John Lawrence from P&W, who had some remarkable insight following a great conversation that Dave Secord had with a science panel. And Dave gave us some insight and thoughts, and John helped us produce what then became the sessions, and we allowed that to evolve. So all those people, and I'm supposed to say the many, or I apologize for anyone I missed, because I'm sure I did. So it's my honor, as we move into this now, to introduce Beth Pendleton, who's been the Alaska Regional Forester since March 2010. As Regional Forester, Beth oversees the management of over more than 22 million acres of National Forest System lands here in Southeast and in South Central Alaska, working with closely with the region's diverse stakeholders and communities, especially on issues related to forest restoration and strengthening rural community health. So the Tongass and the Chugach, as many of you know, are the two largest single national forests. And having worked on the Chugach and now down in Southeast, the crown jewels of the National Forest System for sure, in my mind. So the beauty and bounty of these forests draw attention from around the nation and the world. Please warmly welcome Regional Forester Beth Pendleton.
Well, good evening. And I really appreciate this opportunity just to make a couple of brief remarks. Many thanks have been given, but a big thanks to all of the sponsors, as well as the partner network, the affiliate scientists, and the ACRC staff that we just celebrated. And Mike, truly a wonderful job that you've done over these last 2 years. And I think there's probably very few of us that can really say that we have started something such as the creation of this center from the ground up. And there have been many hands and many hearts that have helped to do that, but Mike has shown tremendous poise and leadership. So thank you, Mike. You know, I also wanted to acknowledge two employees of the Alaska region and the Pacific Northwest Research Station that continue and will continue to support the work of the center and be very much engaged. I want to acknowledge my Deputy Regional Forester, Ruth Monahan. And I would like to ask each, just of the Forest Service employees across the station and region, if you'd just stand up for a minute, please. Thank you. And many of you had an integral role in this symposium, and very much appreciate that. And there's a lot of work to do, so your continued participation, I know, will be appreciated. You know, the past few days have really been inspiring. They've been provocative and insightful. For me, it's been a true learning experience, and I think back yesterday morning and listening to Kirk Johnson's presentation on the evolution of the rainforest. And boy, did I learn a lot. And just thinking in that perspective of what things were like here millions of years ago and how they have changed and they continue to change. I think to the very insightful and challenging presentation this afternoon around the politics of forest management today, both in Canada and here in Southeast Alaska. And I'm grateful for Martin Nye and for George Hoberg and Rick Harris and Chris Maish and Dave Secord for your contributions to that panel. But just the range of the presentations over the last couple of days have really been an inspiration and give me great hope for the future. It goes without saying that partners and strategic alliances are critically important as we collectively move forward to address conservation of coastal temperate rainforests here in Alaska and around the globe. And it's really evident that we need to work together with a sincere intent to seek collaborative, innovative solutions to sustain our forests and ensure vibrancy in our communities. And it's been really exciting for me to hear that connection between our forests and our communities and how relevant that is here in Alaska. The mission of the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center, integrating science, resource management, and communities, mirrors that of the Forest Service as well. And really, the strategic focus of the Alaska region dovetails with that very nicely. We recognize that the Tongass and the Chugach National Forests are important to the health of our communities, economies at global, national, and regional scales, and to indigenous cultures. The close tie between our forests and society is especially evident here in Alaska. You know, given the preponderance of public lands and the dependence of these communities and their community health, the commons here are critical for livelihoods as well as for a way of life. The Chugach and the Tongass are also the backyard to nearly 2/3 of the state's population. And that provides rich opportunities in these natural systems for our visitors, for those of us that live here. We know that they've been inhabited by Native people for thousands of years, and the rich traditions that continue to this day. The forests are rich in carbon. They provide ecological services like clean water and air, as well as abundant wildlife. They're also home, as we've learned and focused on this week, to some of the nation's most productive and captivating fisheries. Think about the world-famous Copper, Kenai, Russian rivers on the Chugach, the Seatuck, and the Stikine rivers on the Tongass. Together, the Tongass and the Chugach contribute annually anywhere from about 35 to 40% of the wild salmon for our state's commercial fishing industry. These forests also support subsistence lifestyles, sport, and commercial livelihoods, and virtually everyone in South Central and Southeast Alaska are touched by the tremendous productivity of these forests in one way or another. They're also the providers of hydro, renewable power sources that fuel our communities. They are rich in natural resources such as timber and minerals. They are also the destination of millions of visitors each year and provide rich recreational, spiritual, and economic benefits to those that live here. So as one of the founding and supporting organizations of the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center, the Forest Service looks forward to continuing our collaboration with the center to further conservation education and research efforts and to develop means to better support vibrant and resilient communities and ecosystems. We are excited to continue this relationship as we work together to explore new ways to engage our diverse next generation of public land stewards through our Chugach and Tongass children's forests. I'm also really excited to see the Tlingit Haida Central Council newsletter today and the focus on the Heen-Latini Experimental Forest and the great relationship with the Coastal Rainforest Center and Tlingit Haida and the community here to do some great work out on that forest. We're also anxious to continue our work as we transition to second growth forest management on the Tongass, develop woody biomass resources for municipal and home heating, and to collaborate with the communities and stakeholders to develop models for sustainable economic growth while conserving the ecological, social, and cultural resources of Southeast and South Central Alaska. These aspirations are more important than ever as we face a changing climate, increasing demands on those resources, and a recognition that the solutions must come from all of us working together. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, Peter Kareiva, who is the Chief Scientist for the Nature Conservancy, where he's responsible for developing and helping to implement science-based conservation throughout the organization and for forging some new linkages and partners. Peter joined the Nature Conservancy in 2002 after more than 20 years in academia and at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Some of his current research emphasizes that interplay between human land use and biodiversity, resilience in the face of global change, and marine conservation. Peter has authored more than 100 scientific articles. He's recently been elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and is a member of the National Academy of Sciences. I want to give a special thanks to Norm Cohen and Dave Albert from the Nature Conservancy here in Juneau for inviting Peter to be a part of this very successful symposium. So please help me give a warm welcome to Peter Kareiva to speak to us about ecosystem services and corporate sustainability. Peter.
A little bit humbling to get up here after all the inspiring, obviously, acknowledgement of leadership and starting something new and exciting. You can't help but feel the spirit of it. And I also know that at the end of this thing, you don't want to hear too much science. Originally, I was asked by Michael this was the science talk. The first talk was supposed to be provocative, and this is supposed to be science. I have some data slides in here. I'm going to skip over them really fast. I'm only going to do one data slide. It's a horrible slide, but I'm still going to do it because we just got it last week, and I'm excited about the science. But you'll see me skip over the data slides. I also was disappointed to hear that it isn't easy to pull this off. We do an all-science meeting at Nature Conservancy every other year or so. We have 700 scientists. The last one we did in Memphis. I was thinking we should come up next spring here. It would probably be worse than a cruise ship, but, I'm still thinking about it. It's a really great place. So what I want to talk about is environmental services, ecosystem services, ecological services. It's been a theme throughout these last couple days. And I've seen this slide, at least in one presentation, this cover of The Economist. And the notion here that people have turned to has said, look, we haven't done so well with the environment, and maybe we do better if we valued it, and if we put serious value in it. And related to that is the idea is in a way, society is giving away nature. We're sort of squandering this resource because we give it away for free, all these things that it does for us. We give away for free the carbon assimilation. We give away for free the clean water and the purification of water. We give away for free pollination. And so there's this notion that maybe we'd be a little bit smarter if we place some value on the things nature does for us. And there's been references in a couple of talks to this event, this sort of assessment. I think many of you have heard of it, called the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. It was a global assessment. Really a heartwarming story. The guy who did it quit his job and raised money for it out of his garage in Seattle. So it's an interesting story about one person making a difference. Quit his job at WRI and raised money out of his garage in Seattle. And then, now he's going on. His name's Walt Reed. But after that came out, a number of us academics and conservationists got together and said, there's these ideas about valuing nature. How can we translate these ideas into action? And we formed this thing called the Natural Capital Project. And so it was Gretchen Daly, who was a well-known ecologist, Steve Pulaski, who's an economist, Taylor Ricketts, who at the time was a chief scientist for WWF and now has moved on to University of Vermont. And we founded this notion, this Natural Capital Project. But what I'm going to talk about is it's been a really interesting experiment, and maybe your center here, your sort of coalition, can learn something from it as well as what we ended up doing. The energy and creativity was all the young people, the postdocs, sort of silverback graybeards. We raised the money, we did some of the framing, but we've had maybe 20 to 25 young scientists come through and basically really do the work. The other part of it was they did a lot of the work, but we had in the field people in WWF and TNC putting the ideas to work in real conservation projects. So not just publishing it in journals, you know, talking to national governments, city governments, private industry, and putting it to work. Everything I talk about, you can find, if you Google Natural Capital Stanford, you'll find all the software, all the models, everything I talk about, you could find there. It's all open access. So that's why I can skip over it. First thing, so we've worked in 14 places. And these indicate the places around the world, terrestrially, and the green stars are terrestrial, the red are marine. So all over the world, the Natural Capital Project has touched down with science and asked, if we use this science, can we influence those decisions? You know, going back to that economist, if we use the science of valuing nature, can we make better decisions? That's what we tried to do. One of the early things that the Graybeards did, this was, we don't do very many smart things. This is one of the smart things we did, though, is we said, we want to develop a modeling framework, you know, something that's eventually very easy to download off the web, but we're going to do it in modules. We're going to build modules, a water quality for nitrogen module, a stream flow module, a groundwater module, you know, a carbon sequestration module, a pollinator module, a flooding module. So, and that's in fact, you would attach a scientist, a young postdoc, to building those modules. And so it's very much a notion of taking standard land use and land management data and then building modules to ask what are the consequences of different decisions about land and water use. And then getting outputs in terms of the consequences. You know, there's this notion out there, and I've actually heard it in a couple talks this morning, the ecosystem one, that and this is an illustration for that Economist article. You know, is this valuing nature thing about dollars? Pricing nature. It's almost like, are we going to get the price right? And we went into it, we hired a lot of economists. I'm not sure how many economist postdocs we've had, maybe 4 or 5, to do the dollar valuation. And there's a lot of this out there. You've probably seen things like this. This pie chart there's a very famous paper where they said the ecosystem services provided by nature for the U.S. was $33 trillion a year. As an amateur economist, that's ridiculous. But, you know, what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. And then, you know, you have a lot of people running around. My favorite is the value of New Jersey's ecosystem services for their nature is $19.4 billion per year. My mother-in-law lives in New Jersey. I go to New Jersey a lot. I don't believe that figure. I call those toy numbers and sort of toy values. Going out there and saying, let's look out there and say, how many dollars is that forest over there worth? It's become something of an intellectual fad. I don't think it's actually very useful. And one of the things that's interesting in all those 14 places, I'm going to show you some of the things we've done. We've never, ever, never been asked to put a bottom line dollar figure on it. Never. In implementation. By governments, agencies, or corporations. Never. We have the capacity to do it, but they've never wanted to say, in the end, you know, what's the net balance for these different actions? Bottom line dollar figure. Never been asked. That's surprising. We're often never even asked for any dollar values. So the bottom line, I mean, is you're looking at different decisions and saying, if you do this, what's the bottom line dollar figure? We have been asked sometimes for dollars of particular actions, but not a bottom line. But it's important that we're willing to calculate dollars. I'll come back to why. But I think that's been a shock to us. And now that I've been to these places and I've personally been involved in some of the work, some of the projects, it's become clear to me why. We need to say we can go to dollars, but we actually never have to, you know, give a bottom line dollar figure. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of where we worked, and I'll skip over all the data and fancy map slides. Hawaii, they're working with a Native Hawaiian Land Trust, largest landowner in Hawaii, Kamehameha Schools, and they own a ton of land. It's incredibly valuable, and they have decisions to make about what to do with that land. And so we assisted this community using the science to make decisions about what they do with that land. And the types of decisions, you know, when we look at it as science geeks, we look at it, we get our GIS specialists, and we look at it as maps and decisions about what you're doing on the land. But they amount to things like, are they going to develop it? Are they going to increase grazing? Are they going to go into biofuels? Are they going to change their forestry practices? So it's their land. They own it. They have to get some in return from it, but it's also got cultural importance, sort of intergenerational. And we go in and we work with them and we run scenarios. And we could do, I'm going to skip over this. You're lucky. No data. But in the end, you know, you end up with stories that, like, three of the big choices they could do is, are they going to go into biofuels? Are they going to do development? It's Hawaii. It's beautiful land. Or are they going to promote a sort of mixture of agriculture and forestry? That's a little bit of a cartoon, but those are sort of three scenarios of how they can use this land. And we run through and say what that means for income, for water yield, for water quality, for carbon storage, and things like that. In the end, this is a case they never wanted a bottom dollar line figure. They actually wanted it this way. And then they came up with a plan that in 2011 got the award for the best land plan, you know, in the whole country. And it's very much a balanced mix with much less development than they ever expected going into it. And they also had cultural values in it. So they actually finalized the plan. They didn't use our models to hand them the plan. They used the models and the analysis to help them think about it. And when they thought about it, they weren't thinking in a bottom line of dollars. They were including all their community values and so forth. But they still wanted real science. It's a fascinating story. We'll see. I mean, I think they will follow the plan. You know, it got the community engaged, and I think they'll follow it. Columbia. Going down to Columbia, this is a place that I was involved in. And there, rich mining opportunities. And there the issue is, what's mining going to do to water quality, mainly? Water quality, sedimentation, things like that. And there the decisions to be made, it'd be like much of, I'm sure you have this in Alaska, we have it all across the world now, as search for energy and minerals is going on. You could think of the world as a regions where there's a landscape with not much mining and all sorts of opportunities to give permits for mining. And these different, this is for a region in Colombia, and the different pictures up there, the one furthest on the left is what it currently is. The next one over is permits that are granted, but there's not any mines there yet. And all the way over to the right is what that would look like if all the mines were developed. And so you can do our ecosystem services about what does that do for water quality? What do those mines do? And there the interesting idea is instead of ecology, we've had a lot of ecology in there. We came up with this thing called service sheds, and we added on what I would call human geography. We asked the question not just in terms of what's this going to do to water, but what's it going to do to communities, towns, and cities, and what's the impact on people and the water they received? So we had a people data layer, if you will, which was new for us. You know, we were natural scientists, so we had to learn some new skills. And then you could ask questions. And the questions would be questions like, if you put in this mine, is there anything you can do to mitigate its damage so that the people in that service shed do not experience degraded water? And the colors represent different mining permits. And if it's red, it means you can't mitigate it. And if it's green, it means you could put the mine in and actually mitigate it, and they wouldn't suffer decreased water. Very useful. This was such a powerful demonstration, and now the national government of Colombia is using it as a model. for mining permits. It's interesting, not dollars. They actually frame it in terms of what's happening to the people that are impacted. West coast of Vancouver Island, this is a marine site. And there, as you know, in the marine world, there's all sorts of uses. There's coastal development, wave energy, a lot of potential for wave energy, in the lower 48, wind energy, obviously fishing, aquaculture, so recreation, view sheds. And so there's a case where we look at we worked with 9 First Nations and a number of recreation and other communities to go through this sort of scenario in ecosystem services. One of the things, you know, we talked a lot, I heard some talks this morning about cultural values and how do you put culture in. Our experience actually is that culture comes in, you might think that what you say is we have these environmental services. How do you deal with these cultural values? You can't put dollar values in. And how do you create that data layer associated with the map? And that's true, and that plays a role in it. But the culture actually comes in very much in vision of scenarios. In other words, a step in all of this is always, what are the choices before you? What are the choices for land and water use before you? So now it's not what is the cultural value of this place on the map. That's one, you know, demonstration or manifestation of culture. But another really important manifestation of culture is this visioning exercise of what are the choices before you. And that's sometimes lost in the literature. And I actually think that's the most powerful, that's where the culture emerges the most. You know, the visioning of different choices about what you could do with your lands and waters. So in this case, you know, the service we were looking at was the value of seagrass to reducing erosion and flooding and storm damage. So the value of seagrass, and you could model that, and there's good physical measurements and good science. And the decisions had to do with float houses on the seacoast and the impact of them on seagrass beds and what are the trade-offs in terms of erosion and protection of communities. So in that case, we ended up modeling the seagrass habitat, its impact on erosion and its value to the communities, and that informs the zoning of where you could put the float houses and where you can't put them. And in this case, the First Nations bought into it. I mean, they were there working with the computers and doing it. Very, very powerful. The last one is sort of a cool example, is in the lower 48, grew out of Katrina and all the damage that's going down there because of heavier storms, beach erosion, flooding, and so forth, hurricanes, northeasters. Natural habitats we know well, and the natural habitats are seagrass, marshes, oyster reefs, mangroves, etc. Reduce storm surge. And there's lots of data, and you could actually go in with a civil engineering approach and quantify that really nicely. And in fact, you know, there's restoration of oyster reefs, and you could use those principles to say what's the value of that restoration. So you could restore restoration, and it's just like instead of buying coastal flood insurance, you could put out oysters. And it's actually pretty effective. You can't do it based on simple biological principles. We have an ocean engineer who helps us with this. You know, so we have a really amazing program of restoration. Can't get enough money for it. It costs $1 million to do this per mile. I actually think that's a bargain, $1 million per mile of oyster. But volunteers come out. We had a volunteer day for deploying the bags of oyster shells, and we were flooded with volunteers. We couldn't handle them. We advertised. We thought, you know, we wouldn't get that many volunteers, and immediately you registered on the website, and immediately it was just flooded. People actually wanted to be so engaged in this because they could see it, see the value. And this is, you know, I promised I wasn't going to show science, so I'm not going to show that. I'm not going to show that. Okay. Maybe I'll show that. This is, you could build a web tool. You can get on your computer, because we've mapped the coast and we know the storm thing. You could get on a computer and find where you'll get the most value of putting out an oyster reef. And it's a function of the history of the storm frequency, the current habitat, the topography, the coastline, how close the settlements are. It's a function of a lot of things. So that's cool. Companies. So I mentioned something about corporations. I thought I'd say something about what we do with an example of how this ties in with a corporation. So here we're working with Dow. You know, Dow, this big chemical corporation. What do they get out of this? What do they get out of this type of science? Well, they have a facility in Freeport, 15,000 employees at this facility. It's like a little city. 15,000 employees at this one Freeport facility. And much of the facility is behind levees, but the parts in orange are not behind levees. And the hurricanes and the flooding has gotten more severe, so they face, as a decision, do they build levees, concrete levees, and protect their facilities? Or we came in and said, hey, look at this map. There's natural habitat there, and shoreline habitat. That actually affords a fair bit of storm protection. Lock up that habitat and preserve it. And in fact, that natural habitat's right next to a national wildlife refuge. So it extends that, and you will get flood protection from the natural habitat. So we're doing that analysis. And we'll show them the risk profiles, and they'll make a decision. Now, maybe they'll decide to build the levees. I don't know. But they're seriously, we'll see what happens. You can see how it could actually be in their self-interest to protect the natural habitat where they never even considered it before. They never even considered it before. So that's an example of working with, a chemical corporation, not your idea of the jolly green giant of conservation. But we work with their engineers, and they trust our numbers. This is the only data slide I'm going to show. And I know it's a terrible slide, but I love it so much. We just got it last week. And one of the things we wanted to do was demonstrate to the U.S. how valuable the coastal habitat is. So we created a model, and we looked at the number of people that were within 1 kilometer of the coast that would be exposed to storm damage. And we had storm frequencies, tidal heights, and we had northeasters and hurricane frequencies. And we created a map of vulnerability to storm damage and then the value of natural habitat. And red means you're really vulnerable, and blue means you're much less vulnerable. And then what we show them is that all those histograms are state by state, and there's 2 colors. And one color is how many people are at risk without the habitat, and the other color is how many people are at risk with the habitat. And with the habitat, many fewer people are at risk. And you could go to New York State and say, you know what, New York? You protect your coastal marshes and oysters and your coastal habitat. Effectively, you reduce by 100,000 the number of people at risk. You could go to California and say, you reduce by 300,000 the number of people at risk. Notice those aren't dollars, but it's really powerful. That's an ecosystem service expressed in a way that is really compelling. And we already seen it powerful for New York City, for New York State, and for a number of states. So this has not been published yet. We'll be submitting this within a week or so. But that's my one science slide. I just love it so much. I mean, isn't that cool? I mean, that's a really powerful quantification of an ecosystem service. There's no dollars, but it's a real quantification, and it speaks to something in a way that you can't argue with. Numbers of people that you reduce exposure to. And notice, it's honest in the sense that even with the habitat, there's still a fair number of people exposed. I mean, you're not sitting there and saying, you have the natural habitat and it's a guaranteed protection. You're not saying that. It's the difference between the 2 bars. But natural habitat isn't sufficient by itself, but it adds a lot. It adds a lot. I mean, I love that as an ecosystem service example in the real world. So one of the things we learned, I'm wrapping up so that you can enjoy the rest of the evening, is modularity. It became very, very important to build this as modules. Because you notice with my examples, they were all different things. When you go into a community, when you engage on ecosystem services, you don't go in and say, here's my model, and I'm going to run all the ecosystem services. You go in and say, what do you care about? And then you have to pick out your module of what they care about. And you don't want them to have to waste their time running a big, hairy, fancy computer model for a bunch of stuff they don't care about. A lot of people don't care about carbon sequestration, so you don't force them to do it. Sometimes they don't care about water quality. You don't force them to do it. You know? And so that's the modularity is really important because the modularity is part of the flexibility engaging in different places. Yet it's common data. It's data that we in the Nature Conservancy collect all the time. It's land use, land cover, basic geological, hydrological. You know, it's very common data. In the end, it's very much about trade-offs and scenarios. So we don't end up giving bottom line dollar values. We end up saying, if you do this, you'll lose water quality, but you'll get, you know, residential development dollars. Or you could vision different futures. I made this slide after I listened to a bunch of the talks here. Early on in this NatCap, it was basically all research and field test. These postdoc, hotshot young scientists doing the modeling, and then in the field with people on the ground at all these different places doing the implementation. But now, 6 years into the project, we're investing in something different. We're investing in software design. Hired a bunch of really professional software people so we can make it slick and easy. I think that's important. You know, we can't, right, you know, in the early days, we basically had to send our postdocs to China. We had to send our postdocs to Colombia. We had to send our postdocs to Indonesia. We wanted it to be so you could just get on the web and make it easy. And then training and communication. We want to professionalize the training and communication and intend to do it in a way probably with 2 tiers so that for community groups and NGOs, it'll be free, and if you're a corporation, you pay for it. Seems like a good model, right? So that's just the evolution of the project. Research and development early on with some field tests, and now professionalizing sort of what, I guess how you call it, professionalizing the delivery. And we'll see how that goes. We actually meet, you know, I'm going from here to that, and we're meeting for the first time to do a business plan for how we're going to do that professionalization. We end up by saying, you know, there's this criticism out there that these ecosystem services are selling out on nature, selling out nature. And it's in the academic literature, and I'm going to be a little bit harsh here because often the people who write these criticisms don't actually go into the field and do it. You know, it's an intellectual argument, but when you go to Colombia or you go to Indonesia or China, you don't feel like you're selling out nature. You feel like you're respecting different people's values. I don't feel like I'm selling out nature. But there's this theme that's in a bunch of the economic and ecological literature about this. So I'll return to this. Remember, I said we're never, ever been asked to give a dollar bottom line. Never. And there's a whole bunch of new projects coming up, and I don't think we will. But why do I say it's important to say you will calculate dollars? Here's my analogy. You know, when you get out of college, when you're in college, you wore jeans and tattered sweaters. I still wear jeans and tattered sweaters. But you get out of college, you wear jeans and tattered sweaters, right? You have your first job interview. What do you do out of respect? You dress nicely, right? Well, if you're going to go in and talk to a corporation, or if you're going to go in and talk to China's Ministry of Development, out of respect, you tell them that I understand your values. You know, we get mad when people don't understand biodiversity values and conservation values. Well, it's equally upsetting from the other side to not respect monetary and economic development values. So I think it's very important to go into these analyses and engagements and say, yes, we will calculate dollar values if you want. Just like when you go for a job interview, You don't wear your jeans and your tattered, sweater. You dress up. And because of that, I've talked to oil palm companies, coffee growers, sugar cane growers, so many different things. Because we go in with dollar values, they treat us differently. Treat us very differently. The other thing is maps are compelling. In the end, it's all about maps. We like that at Nature Conservancy because we're among the best map makers there are, thanks to our tremendous sort of GIS talent. And just remember, maps have been a part of culture. It's one of my favorite. This is early 8,000 or 9,000 years ago, and it's stones on which you can't see it that well, but in which you could see maps, and you could see maps of rivers and pathways and so forth. So we've been using maps for a long time, and it's a very powerful way to visualize the world. And so I'll end here and say, it's not about dollars. In the end, it's not about dollars. It's about maps and choices, which empowers better decisions. And the biggest tragedy of all, frankly, is a lot of us get in this business. In the end, you know what we end up doing? And everywhere I go, we end up in rooms like this. This happens to be in Victoria. But we end up in rooms like this. We all in this business because we love to be outdoors, but we're sitting here in front of our laptop with a bunch of people running models. That's sort of the personal tragedy of my career and a lot of our careers. But that is actually how it works. And I think I'll leave it there. That's where I think ecosystem services, environmental value, value in nature, whatever you want to call it, is the way of the future for smarter decisions about how we use our lands and waters. Thanks. I'll be glad to take questions. I can't believe you had that stamina. I must have been way too polite.
I'll bring it home with an effort in terms of the not about dollars, but maps and choices. In Juneau, the city is considering allowing development of a gold mine in our watershed, the main community watershed for our communities. And when you hear arguments in favor of mining in Southeast Alaska in the community of Juneau, you hear a lot about the number of jobs and the number of dollars that those jobs will create. And the people who are promoting development are talking about dollars a lot. And they're putting numbers on them, even if, I don't know how good their numbers are, but they're putting numbers on them. And those seem to be speaking to the public. So I guess I'm not completely convinced that nobody would ask you for the dollars, and it seems that that would have some value to have those dollars.
So so when I said nobody's never, ever, never means nobody's ever asked for a bottom line dollars. And that means let's do the dollar value of clean water, let's do the dollar value of forest carbon, let's do the dollar value of these ecosystem services, and let's say this project on net is dollars. So they do ask for dollars for particular things. So yes, they do ask for dollars, but they don't ask for the dollar resolving the whole decision. So there's a difference. So in Colombia, when they do the mining industry say this is how many dollars it will deliver. But then the other data that you give, this is how many people will suffer poor water quality. And you don't put the dollar value on the people that would suffer poorer water quality and compare that dollar to the dollar value of the mining company and come up with a bottom line. Is that clear? See what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's actually, what you say is interesting because this was also something that we learned. When we started out doing this, we were all natural scientists, and we didn't have data on people and where they lived. We just didn't do that. We weren't used to that. And now we have to do that everywhere because we find that speaks very loudly. And in fact, the big dollars go in one direction. It doesn't necessarily benefit that many people. So if you do it in terms of number of people that are going to suffer degraded water, that's a powerful statistic. And that can countervail big dollar values. Jobs, if you notice, I bet you this will be the case. This will be the case where we've worked. The job numbers are often small. Smaller compared to the number of people affected. So think about the measures. So you can do dollars, jobs, number of people affected. Those are three different measures. You provide all of them, frankly. but it helps clarify things. Other questions?
How do you deal with risk?
You know, that's so that. Damn, that has to be a hard question every night. So that the place that we're dealing with risk is we've been talking with Munich Re and Willis Re. Do you know what those are? The big major global reinsurance companies. So reinsurance companies are the ones that cover the damages of the insurance companies from which you buy your insurance, your storm or flood insurance. And it's a huge industry, very, very powerful industry. And they actually have chief scientists. They're very good scientists, a lot better chief scientists than I am. And so we get together there, and we just did this 2 weeks ago for the first time. If you go to if you Googled Munich Re and natural disaster, you'd be amazed. They believe in climate change more than anybody. They mince no words about it because they're paying out money for it. And so with them, we're trying to get them to value nature as a risk reducer. Now, we're not there yet. And we got to find a pilot project. We're probably going to do the pilot project in the northeast of the U.S. because contrary to, you know, it's not northeasters that sweep up New England and the coast of the Northeast do a lot of flood damage, a lot of property damage. And they're more common than, you know, the big hurricanes. So we're probably going to try to engage that industry in the value of natural habitats and reducing risk. And that'll be that's going to take us 2 years to work through the different cultures of a reinsurance company and us. But I actually think there's a tremendous opportunity for dealing with risk in terms of these ecosystem services. It just is going to take learning the machinery to know how to do it. But I encourage anybody to go to Munich Re and look up natural catastrophes. They put out amazing reports, detailed maps of your risk and everything. It's impressive.
My question is, how do you take this process, this thought process, and make it more accessible to those of us who are not scientists? Because this thought process really resonates with me, but I don't necessarily know how to go out and find the information or do the research or anything like that. But I really appreciate this point of view and how to merge the values of, you know, a business or a corporation versus the people that are living in the space that are affected.
So, I mean, that's where we failed so far. I mean, because we've been a geek operation, a science operation, and it's also very expensive to send our scientists all over the place. That's the point of professionalizing. We want to have software and training that is not for scientists, that could be for decision makers and community groups. We don't have that yet. And I think we could develop it. I think we can hire high enough quality people and educators and know how to do it. But that was, you know, at the end of our 5 years of our project, we thought it through and said, you know, crap, I mean, we're not, you know, we can't keep doing this. You know, we can't send 5 scientists to China and do a project on a one-off basis. We got to go to a model that meets your need. Unfortunately, we don't meet your need now. Come back in 2 years, 4 years. 4 years. 4 years.
What if I came back in 10 years? What would it look like? I've heard a lot about payment for ecosystem services, biodiversity credits, carbon trading, and so forth. Where is the end stage of all of this?
So I think the end stage will when I go to foundations and donors and try to get them to give me money, I say this has got to be like TurboTax or PowerPoint. It's got to be that straightforward for people to get on and use it, but have under the layer it be that credible and reliable. But the interesting thing is, you know what a really strong uniter is over and over again, water. It could either be water flow, water supply, or water quality. I'll guarantee you that that's going to be a dominant theme where whatever. because you see that over and over and over again. And the other things, even carbon, are kind of like niche markets. But water cuts, it's just everywhere. When in the places we've been to, water and water quality. And then I think the next one actually after water, but we don't have it developed, will be this risk question. Floodplains, coastal floods, risk reduction. Fires. Think about what land management affects. Fire risk, flooding risk, and coastal damage. And those are big deals. People, that affects people. So, environmental TurboTax. You'll see. 10 years. $60 a pop. Any questions? Thanks a lot. It's been fun.
Thank you, Peter, for 2 great talks, for inspiring and stirring us, definitely. And thank you, Beth, for your words tonight. Rick and Paul, Bill, thank you all. The sponsors, the North Pacific LCC, I'm not going to run down the whole list, but the sponsors brought this together. The volunteers, the session chairs, the speakers. ACRC, Brad, Brittany, Heather, Adam, and Brittany. Thank you. Have a great night. Enjoy.